Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to the Patricia Raskin Positive Living Show, right here on VoiceAmericaMedia.com, America's Voice. We're in our 24th year on Voice America. I've been on many different programs on many different networks, but I've always stayed with the stable program of Voice America Media. So it's wonderful to be here. And this program is about turning your obstacles into opportunities and your problems into solutions. And today is an absolute perfect topic for that. We are talking to Deepika, Deepika Chopra, and she is a clinical psychologist, and her book is The Power of Real Optimism. And what she talks about is grudges that we hold on to. Why do we hold on to them? What is forgiveness all about? How are we able to deal with people and stay optimistic even when they're not optimistic and they're pessimistic? So we have a lot to talk about today. Dr. Deepika Chopra is a professional psychologist, visual imagery expert, and founder of Things Are Looking Up, a consultancy devoted to the intersection of science and soul. She specializes in what she has coined evidence-based manifestation, which draws from behavioral science, emotional fitness, neuroscience, and ancient wisdom to build modern tools for resilience and joy. Dr. Chopra holds a doctorate in clinical health psychology and completed a double postdoctoral fellowship at both the University of California, Los Angeles, and Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. She has been featured on the Today Show, in Vogue, in Forbes, in Variety, in Harper's Bazaar, and many more, and has led many workshops for companies like Google's and Amazon and Amex. So welcome. I'm
It
going
is
to
so
make sure I'm
great to be
saying your name
here.
correctly. Um, Welcome, Deepika.
Yes, that was great. It's so great to
Perfect.
be here.
Yes, I'm excited to have you on. I mean, this is what I've been talking about for 4 decades. But and I have a lot of my own questions with this. But one of the things I'd like you to talk about that's in your book that I think is interesting is why our brain actually will hold on to a grudge,
Yes.
why
Well,
we can't let go.
yes, that is so important. And first of all, I want to just state, yes, I am known as the optimism doctor, and this is what I study, but surprise, I am not the most optimistic person. And it is something I work on every single day. And I'm sure we'll dive into that. But yeah, the brain clings on to grudges. And the reason for this is the brain is wired to remember emotional threats because
Mhm.
that is in the past what has helped
Yeah,
humans survive.
yeah.
And so when someone hurts us or a conflict remains unresolved, the brain keeps replaying it over and over as a way to actually understand what happened and to hopefully prevent it in the future.
Mhm.
And, the part of our brain that's involved in this is the amygdala. And that is our threat response center. And it tags these experiences as really important, which is why grudges can actually feel so vivid and persistent, even, as time goes on.
Yeah, I think the question then, and we'll probably get to this later, but I think the real question is, how do you fight with that? And in a way, it is a fight, right? It's
Mhm.
a fight with the brain saying, wait a minute, I don't want to hold on to you anymore. I want to handle this person differently or situation differently. And that's a real conscious effort, correct?
Yes. It is whenever something is automatic or that we are predisposed to it from an evolutionary standpoint, which many of us are predisposed actually to think more pessimistically because again, similarly to what we just talked about way back when our ancestors, when they saw a threat, which at that point was probably a saber-toothed tiger, while they were in hunt, if they imagined the worst case scenario, they prepared for it and then they survived and they ended up passing that on and so on. And what we know about today's modern world is, of course, there are still predators and things that are threats to us. They look very different now than obviously saber-toothed tigers. And that's a whole nother thing of how many threats we constantly loop in the day now. It is so much more than it was then. We are living in sort of this fight, flight, freeze now almost entirely throughout our entire day. And the thing is, we know what we know about modern times are and how we actually live is that chronically imagining the worst case scenario does not, in fact, help us survive or thrive now. It is obviously very important to prepare, but so whenever these things are we are predisposed to something and that is the way our brain is wired, then that means it's up to us. It's intentional work in order to kind of combat that.
Right. So my question is, having said all of that about how the brain will hold on to grudges and it's almost like wired in, how do you define optimism? How does optimism fit into this?
Yeah. So first of all, I always like to say most people think optimism is this idea or notion of,
Pollyanna.
Pollyanna living, blissfully 24/7,
Yeah, I know.
devoid of reality. A lot of people will say, "Oh, I'm not an optimist. I'm a realist because I'm grounded in reality." Always looking at the world through rose-colored glasses and drinking many, many glasses of half full water. And I think that, what's important is to really redefine what optimism is. And so in the book, The Power of Real Optimism, which actually comes out tomorrow, which is very exciting, I am defining something that I call real optimism. And real optimism isn't actually about pretending that everything is fine. It's really much more about interpreting challenges in a way that, allows for forward movement. And so someone that is in real optimism is someone that's actually so keenly and mindfully aware of the roadblocks and the setbacks and the less than ideal situations that, by the way, spoiler alert, we all go through because none of us are immune to struggle. It's part of actual everyday daily human living. But the caveat is that they see these setbacks as something that are temporary and something that they have the ability to overcome, even if they don't know how or when, but it's really based on personal and historical resilience. So all of your hard days thus far that you've already overcome.
Right. So it's being able to see beyond and moving forward, even though you have, the mud in front of you or the whatever it is, the stumbling blocks in front of you, you see what can be on the other side. I think really that's what you're talking about. My question is, and it's a little bit tougher because I've dealt with this and I still do at times, is when you have those difficult people and I teach this, that no matter what you say, they're not going to change. So, for example, the standard comment from that difficult person will be, "Oh, I didn't mean it that way. You're too sensitive." Or instead of an apology, you get, "Oh, I understand. I didn't realize how sensitive you are."
Right. Throwing it
Nothing
right back at
about what did I say, because they don't know about their intent.
right.
And so what I learned is they're not going to change. I'm going to get those snarky comments again. I'm going to get that little whatever it is again. And so how do I do that in the future so that it doesn't build up and then I start to explode?
That is
And
such a great question. And I think most of us have experienced this, if not once, many times. And you're going to really dislike the first part of what I say, because I think it is one of those things where you're like, yep, I've heard that before, but then what? So I'll say the first thing and then give you the then what. But again, just a reminder that we cannot control other people.
that's right.
Right. There are many things that we cannot control, circumstances, other people. I think I saw this quote once and it was like, you can't change, you can't change the people, but you can change the people. So what I mean by that is we don't have any control over other people's behaviors and thoughts, although the way we behave and think does have an impact on the people around us. And I think that's important. The first and foremost thing I think is to regulate before reacting. And
Mhm.
so our brains actually prioritize safety and survival and regulation over growth. And so we can have all the tips and the tools and listen to all the podcasts and read all the
Mm.
books, but we aren't really able to grow and to widen that prefrontal cortex unless our brains are actually feeling and signaling to us that we feel safe. And so the first thing is to even a few slow, deep breaths. Like we want ourselves, which many times the opposite can be happening when we're faced with someone like that. You are sort of in this defense mode. You maybe feel rage even, or you feel confused, and maybe there's real physical stuff happening, in your parasympathetic system, and your
Mhm.
palms get sweaty, your breath becomes a little short. So to
Mhm.
slow down first, and even just taking a few deep breaths. So we want to come from a place of regulation before we react. And we really want to make space for reflection.
Mhm.
And I think it's important to always remind ourselves we don't have to react right away if this happens. We can literally say, wow, well, you are giving me a lot to reflect on.
Right.
I'm going
Right.
to take a few moments or a few
Yeah.
days to reflect on this, and then we'll pick this back up again. Like you have the power to do that. And
Yeah.
then I think it's, boundaries over battles, and so you also have the power, it depends what type of relationship this is.
Right.
Sometimes we can't control, again, who is in our lives. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. If this is someone that, for example, is a family member that you live with, and not all of us have the privilege of changing things up all the time.
Right.
If we do, then I would suggest if this is a repetitive pattern and we feel so dysregulated around the same person over and over, it's really worth taking a look at boundarying.
Mm.
Um, if you can't remove yourself from it, then giving yourselves tools. I remember a certain person that was married into our family that became, I guess, a sense of family, and was so triggering and
Mm.
difficult for me. And I was a lot younger, but every single time that I was in his presence, I literally felt so off my kilter. Like
Mm.
I felt rageful, I felt tearful, I like
Mm.
all my emotions that I just, in that moment, I was young. I just, either reacted and exploded, as you had said, or I completely avoided. And I needed to understand over time that there were specific tools that now I do in order to prepare myself when I
Mm.
see this individual, because it is, I feel more powerful and empowered and more confident when I am regulated before I have to be in the presence of this very triggering human.
Yeah, let me share an experience that speaks to exactly what you're saying. Exactly, is that what I do is I know ahead of time what I'm going to get. I mean, I know the snarky comment's going to come in from left field, and I know that. And so, what I do, in addition to breathing, is we're often out to dinner. What I'll do is I either ignore it,
Mm-hmm.
or I smile, or I say, good question.
Mm-hmm.
I don't react because I did once. And when I reacted, in the way you were talking about, and I just kind of exploded. I said, Patricia, what are you doing? You teach this. And that gave me pause to really realize what I'm going to get in the future. They don't even realize what they do, and they're not going to change.
Right.
Particularly when I got, oh, I'm so sorry you're so sensitive. I thought, okay, that's it. So there was a snarky comment that came,
Mm-hmm.
and I just made believe I didn't hear it because it was said in passing. But now people might say, oh, well, Patricia, you're just ignoring it. No, I'm not ignoring it. But for me to say something to them is going to cause an argument.
Right.
Nothing will be accomplished because they are not interested in changing, nor are they interested in really understanding what they do because it's never about them. It's always about, and I've seen it in the family. It's the other person that's bad. It's the other person that's wrong. So that you can't change. And I
And a
think
lot of
is
times I feel like, in fact, ironically, that particular person, and of course, I don't know the one you're speaking of, but even in my experience, this is now in the realm of like narcissism. They really, the argument is what makes them tick. And so actually what you start to realize is when you explode, it is literally just
Fuel.
the fuel that they just so very much need. And
Yeah,
in this
yeah,
circumstance,
yeah.
this person is someone that is married into my family. And I actually got like he's not, I would say at best to say he's not a great person. He has this trigger on a lot of people, and he's not been he hasn't created safety for my family member. And so for a lot of us, it is a safety issue. And so, after getting married and having my own children, I have now even boundaried it to the part where I actually do not see him. And it has now become very apparent and clear that after many years of trying the
Right,
tools to be in the
right,
presence, it's
right,
no longer healthy or safe. And
right.
so there is a point where that can happen. And it is okay, even in a family, to have to be
Absolutely.
able to draw a very hard line like that. Hopefully, that's a rare circumstance, and there is a lot in between, and there is a lot of repair that I think is so
Yeah,
important in this
yeah,
type of work. But it does
yeah,
sometimes get to that place.
yeah. Deepika, I'm glad you mentioned that. I think that's very important. Sometimes it's a little different, like in my situation, where this person can be wonderful,
Mhm.
absolutely kind, and then all of a sudden, boom, a zinger. So what I'm, but it's not, it's manageable, but
Right,
I have to manage it. It doesn't mean it doesn't bother me, but I
right,
realize and then I also know from this person and other people in the family, once you say something, it goes away. If you say, "Oh, really? Didn't think about that," they don't bring it up again. So
right,
this is not the same kind of escalation that you're talking about.
right.
So we
It's
have to,
on a
as you said,
continuum.
right? We have to exactly. You're saying we have to know
Yes.
our people.
Yes, and know your nervous system and know your boundaries and your limits. And real optimism doesn't deny that there are difficult people that will exist, or
Right.
difficult relationships, or any type of struggle. In fact, I always say real optimism doesn't deny the dark, it gives us the tools to see within it. And,
Perfect.
relationships really, just like so many other things, exist on a continuum. And
Right.
the bottom line is sort of, that time that we all have to take to really get to know our own selves. And
Right.
once you know yourself and what is okay, tolerable, repairable, and sometimes
Then you
not.
can move on. Right.
Yes.
All
And
right, we're going to take a break. This is so fascinating. In our next segment, we're going to talk about the difference between emotionally suppressing something and generally really resolving it. And my guest today is Dr. Deepika Chopra. She's a professional psychologist, visual imagery expert, and founder of Things Are Looking Up, which is a consultancy devoted to the intersection of science and soul. She holds a doctorate in clinical health psychology. And she has been on many television programs and major magazines and taught for major companies. Stay tuned, folks. You're listening to the Patricia Raskin Positive Living Show right here on voiceamerica.com, voiceamericamedia.com. We'll be right back. Hi, everyone. We are back. We are back with Dr. Deepika Chopra, and she's a professional psychologist, visual imagery expert, and founder of Things Are Looking Up. She is also the author of the brand new book, The Power of Realism, or The Power of Real Optimism. Welcome back, Deepika. Yeah,
Thank
show
you
us the
so much.
book.
Thank you so
It's
much. It's
real,
really
for those of you on YouTube, The Power of Real Optimism, and the subtitle.
a practical science-based guide to staying resilient, curious, and open, even when life is hard.
That's such a great, so needed. So let's talk about that difference between that unresolved conflict and how we suppress it emotionally, but
Mhm.
there's a difference between that and resolving it.
Yeah. So again, what we sort of mentioned before, unresolved conflict really imprints on our brain. And so, how unresolved conflict keeps that nervous system activated when a conflict feels unfinished or unresolved, the nervous system can literally often stay in this low grade state of stress response for a really long time. And this, the brain starts to perceive the situation then as unresolved, which then keeps the body in a state of threat and vigilance. That elevates our cortisol, rumination starts. We have difficulty relaxing. It impacts our sleep. It impacts our immune system. It even impacts the way that we breathe. And
Mm,
so a lot of times our brain is aware that we have this unresolved conflict. It's almost like a file that's open that cannot be closed because it hasn't been resolved. And sort of emotionally, we feel it, physically, we feel it, but cognitively, we're not so, it can kind of get missed, and sort of just what we experience are all these other side effects. And so conflict is a really important part of this work because it is something that can really impair us. But I want to be very clear that yes, the goal is to resolve whatever the conflict is so that we can move forward. But oftentimes, again, the resolve of it, can sometimes look like repair and moving forward with whoever this unresolved conflict is with, or sometimes it can really be a hard line of removing the solve is removing that person or the thing altogether. And these are not, again, tools to withstand unsafety or abuse.
yeah. Yeah, and you're right. It is about abuse. Now, when you were talking before about, people often will say, well, and I've gotten this, you're Pollyanna, you're not realistic. And I will say, well, I really am realistic, but I try to look for where the positive is. How do affirmations fit into this? Journaling,
Mm-hmm.
creating your own vision board, if you will. How does that fit into being real, but also being optimistic?
So I have a very nuanced relationship with affirmations. And I would say, oh, maybe nuance isn't the right word. It's very much based in science and data, which is sort of where I like to come from. And obviously, that married to things that are deeply human and nuanced. But I don't actually prescribe blanket statement generic affirmations for people because the science really shows that for the people that really need the affirmations, when we say a generic affirmation that they don't actually believe, at the best, it's just not useful. And at worst, it can actually be very detrimental for us. So, as adults, we have racked up a lot of evidence to then hold a specific belief. And that belief can become very cement and it can become a core belief of ours. And sometimes those core beliefs are self-limiting and they're more on the negative side. And maybe, if someone holds a belief that they are undeserving of love, to just look in front of a mirror and say, I deserve love. I'm lovable 3 times a day in the morning and at the night. What happens on the inside of your brain is it starts like those files. It takes out all the files of the past,
Mhm.
45 plus years of all the evidence to support why that is just not true. And now, not only do you not believe it more, you have all this evidence in front of you. It further cements your self limiting belief. And you actually feel shameful and guilty about the fact that you could ever say such a thing. And so there is a chapter in The Power of Real Optimism, my book, which comes out tomorrow, which is all about affirmations and how you can actually use them. And I believe in this practice that I've developed called the 7 tenths rule. And we need to be believing 7 out of 10, 10 being we believe it the most, 0 being we believe it the least. We should be able to rate something 7 out of 10 in believability to be able to use it as a true affirmation that will work for us.
That's great. That's very sound, as you would say, very sound and somewhat science-based, just in terms of what's the reality for each person. And
Yes.
it's different. And that's really speaks to the difference between real optimism and blind optimism.
Yes, exactly. And, I think that I'm really passionate about helping people come up with their own really practical, tangible tools that they can actually use like today, to make these small but powerful shifts. And then over time, over not a lot of time, their actual daily life changes. And so I believe more in these micro tools and even the idea of micro moments. And so there's another tool that I use a lot. And I think it also really helps with conflict resolution and unresolved conflicts. And people all and it helps a lot with uncertainty. I sort of specialize a lot in giving people tools of real optimism during uncertainty, which I think we are all in collectively in a period right now, globally,
Yeah.
personally, all of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And so we right now, sort of what we talked about at the top of this was, our brains obviously were meant to hold worry. Worry is, again, a normal part. Stress is literally the response to daily living as a human. So if you are a human, you experience stress and worry. But our brains and nervous systems were not meant to experience this much worry all at once that we are all exposed to. And so something that maybe, we were in fight, flight, freeze mode, as we talked about before, maybe like once a week in our ancestors when we had the big hunt. Now we are in, and especially women, we are in the fight, flight, freeze mode almost entirely throughout our whole day. And that is wreaking havoc on our nervous systems. And so I always talk about, which I think people always look at me with this face when I prescribe this to them. I am the opposite of telling someone that they can create a life without worry, because that's just not true. That's impossible. And so I would never say that. What I do say is let's schedule your worry time into your actual daily calendar. And so I am a big believer of containing structured worry. So really taking your worries and validating them and structuring them so that you have a structured place in your day for reflection and worry, instead of ruminating and letting it run wild the entire day, which can cause emotional paralysis for most of us, or numbness or apathy.
One of the things that has helped me in all of that is when I look at whatever I'm needing that isn't here yet, I look at, okay, am I doing everything I can? And if I'm doing everything I can, that's when that spiritual sense takes over and says, okay, I want to do this and you want me to do this because it creates more abundance or whatever it is, then I need that guidance. I need that help. So I think that's been very helpful, is that belief that you're doing what you can. Yes, there are obstacles. Yes, we don't know. Yes, but we're moving forward.
And, real optimism is not a psychological trait or a personality trait. Sorry. It's more of a psychological skill. It is something learned. And so it's trainable. And that is the part where I feel so optimistic about all of this. And the way that it's trainable is really, there's a few different ways, but one of the most powerful ways is what we call in psychology explanatory style. And so reminding ourselves that whatever moment or season that you're in is temporary. And I think that is one of the most powerful tools. We may
Yes.
not know how something is going to go. We may not know. We are rooted and really sitting in our authentic feeling and challenge at the moment. And we give validity to it. We don't push it underneath the rug. We, really are like, wow, this is hard. This is why it feels this way. it makes sense that I would be so upset.
Right.
And at the very same time, I'm curious about how this will change.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm at a place yet where I'm able to say it's going to be so much better or
Mhm.
I know how it's going to change. I'm
Right.
just rooted in the fact that I know it will change. And
Yeah.
there is some solace in that and allowing some space for hope
Right.
and for curiosity. I think
Yeah. I,
curiosity is such an underrated.
I think something you just said about hope, I think that's the key. Because if we don't have hope, then we can't go anywhere. We're
Right,
just like stuck in that little box. So I think
right.
that's so important. One of the things you talk about in your book is called ikigai.
Mhm.
Explain what that is and why that's crucial.
So I love antiquity. It's so funny. I study, future directed thinking, but I've always been someone that is very nostalgic and I love learning from the past. And so, I am from an Indian background, and a lot of sort of how I was raised was, ancient practices that were founded in places like India. But I've always been really drawn to Japan and the Japanese culture. And on a trip there once in my early 20s, I was taught a few different things. But one of the things I was really curious about that I had heard, and I came home and sort of did a deep dive on, is this idea that is from Okinawa, a place in Japan called Ikigai. And there has been a lot done now where I feel like it's a little more mainstream, but ikigai literally translates to like a reason for being. Why do we wake up in the morning? So it is a practice that is all about finding your purpose. And there is a ton of scientific research done on how important it is. And I'm sure you know all about that, how important it is to have a sense of purpose in our lives. And something that was so interesting to me is we know that is true for adults. And having a sense of purpose is what propels us forward, it is what gives us motivation to change. And change is the hardest human state of existence to be in,
Yeah.
yet we all have to go through it. But what I thought was so interesting recently, I read a study that knowing your purpose and really intentionally being aware of what your purpose is actually very protective to teens' mental health. And so I don't ever remember talking about what my sense of purpose was as a teen. And so I started running some of these Ikigai workshops early on. A lot of times I do them in the corporate sector, but also, with a group of women or men, and now actually with a group of older teens. And what I love about this practice is it is something that is creative and fun to do. It also makes you think, it's challenging, and it's something you can do with others. But what I will preface with it is that I've found is most helpful. You really want to be doing this practice almost seasonally, because obviously our lives change again. Everything's on a continuum. We are in different seasons of our lives, different circumstances, and our purpose can shift and change.
Yeah.
And once you kind of know what your purpose is in that season, it makes things even like decision making and taking action so much easier, because we are plagued with so many choices these days that it is easy for us to kind of be in decision paralysis. But once we sort of ask ourselves, which one of these sort of goes down the same direction as my purpose and my values, it's a lot easier to stand firm. And I talk about this in the book a lot. There's a chapter also on intuition from a science-based perspective and how we can get back to our intuition.
Is optimism, you have three P's for optimism. Is one of them purpose?
No, it's actually more in the explanatory style. So it's like pervasiveness, personalization. So it's more, but it should be in terms of real optimism, how to practice it. One of the P's, if there were, would be purpose for sure, because that is such a hallmark sort
Yeah.
of pillar
Yeah.
of real optimism.
All right, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about how do we change our language to boost optimism? What is the self-talk or things we say that that not only aren't optimistic, but can hold us back, even though we think they're just words, they're more powerful than that. And then we'll also talk about how to fight like an optimist and what are the things that we can do to build that optimism muscle, right? And we are here with Dr. Deepika Chopra, and she holds a doctorate in clinical health psychology. Her book is The Power of Real Optimism. And if you want to hold that up,
Hold
that
on.
would be great. It's beautiful. And a practical, science-based guide for staying resilient, curious, and open, even when life is hard. So everyone go out and get this. Now, this show is evergreen, meaning that people might listen to it a year or two from now.
Mhm.
But we are now in March of 2026, and Deepika's book is coming out tomorrow, which will be March 10th, 2026. So do get it. It's so important, particularly in today's world where we're hearing a lot of negativity, and optimism is just so key. All right. You're listening to the Patricia Raskin Positive Living Show right here on voiceamericamedia.com, and we'll be right back. Well, hello, everyone, and we are back. You are listening to the Patricia Raskin Positive Living Show right here on voiceamericamedia.com. Today, we're talking about one of my favorite subjects, which is optimism, but real optimism. My guest is Dr. Deepika Chopra, and her book is The Power of Real Optimism. And I'm reading the subtitle as she's holding it up. A practical, science-based guide to staying resilient, curious, and open even when life is hard. And so this is what we've been talking about. And welcome back, Deepika. I mean, this is not an easy subject. It sounds like, oh, yeah, well, I just won't say anything. I'll just walk away. It's not that easy because, as you said, your body's holding on to all of that.
Right.
So, yeah, what I'd like to talk about next is how do we, well, certainly we talked about grudges. And so that's one thing that we talked about. But how do we shift our language? Because if we
Mhm.
shift our language, that can help us with the grudges. If we're always saying, oh, what an awful person, what an evil person, well, then we're not shifting. So the
Right.
positive languaging helps us to boost our optimism. Talk about that.
Yeah, people are often so surprised how important and powerful language actually is in this
Yeah,
work.
yeah.
And, and I think the other piece of that, I know for myself as well, it's not even that. It's that when you start to be mindful of your language, how much pessimistic language we actually use to tell our own daily life story and how much that is hindering us. And just these small shifts where you're like, wow, I do that a lot, or I do say that. And if you just shift the language, like how quickly and powerful other things start to shift. And so this is sort of where I want to talk about the 3 Ps, which are personalization, permanence, and pervasiveness. And so oftentimes, again, many of us are predisposed to use language that is sort of more in the pessimistic realm. And this can look like, when something kind of like what you just said, when something happens that didn't go our way, our initial reaction is, oh, this is always going to be this way, or like, I'm never going to be able to get this done, or I'm never going to be able to fix
Yeah,
this, or of
yeah,
course, this, and
yeah.
then like personalizing it. Of course, I can't do this, so someone that is more in the real optimism realm, this part's really interesting, is someone that when something good happens in life, they are able to actually take sort of agency and responsibility and personalize it, that they had a part, in fact, in that good thing happening or that win. Whereas a lot of us, when good things happen, are more comfortable saying things like, oh, well, that was just good luck. Or thank goodness, the team did X, Y, and Z because
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
helped me get what I wanted. And we
yeah.
sort of take ourselves out of it. We don't give ourselves credit. So being able to give yourself credit and personalizing when something good happens is a hallmark of optimism. And the opposite, when something that happens that doesn't go so well, oftentimes most of us are actually really prone to taking personal responsibility for that. So that happened, it was all my fault, it's always going to be this way, and it's never going to change. Those
Yeah.
are more in the pessimistic realm. And the reason I say language is so important, I'm actually a mom of 3 young kids. I have an 8-year old, a 5-year old, and a 2-year old. And when I was sort of in this work, in the thick of it, I think I had 2 kids at that time, and we were almost having our third. And a lot of the questions that started to come up that I was really passionate about now personally were, how do we raise more optimistic children? Because really the key is getting these tools proactively into the hands of our children so that they have the ability to navigate through uncertain times, which we are all going to face. And so I started thinking about it a lot. And, there's so much parenting advice out there. And, everything is sort of like having the perfect packaged with a bow on it response when something happens in the moment to say, like the best thing to say. When really our kids, the way they learn, and honestly, most people around us, even in our relationships, is through modeling. We are all mirrors of each other. And so if we are careful and intentional about our own self growth, and if we are intentional about wanting to increase our real optimism, it is only then likely that those around us will also, because they learn through modeling. And so one of the most potent ways, and this really works in relationships as well as with kids, but is to think about how you're saying something. So is to change the language into something that is more on the realm of optimism. Again, this is not denying the tough times. This is not finding just silver linings at all. This is being rooted in reality, but using language that understands that where you are and what you're experiencing is temporary.
And something else about that I have found is when I change my language and
Mm-hmm.
my tone, I
Mm-hmm.
get a different reaction.
Yes.
I get a very different, and if I do it over time, I keep getting a different reaction. And
Yeah.
again, as you said, you plan it, you practice it
Mm-hmm.
enough until it becomes part of you.
Yes.
So that reaction you might have made before, which is right at them, is
Mm-hmm.
now, a breathing, a pausing, okay, and saying something in a very calm voice. And I think that, as you said, that's going to make all the difference. It's you're training people in a way, you're training them how to behave
Yes.
because they're not going to scream at you if they don't have anything to scream at after a
Right.
while.
Right.
You're not going to fight back with them.
Right. And I also think it's important that you will, like, a lot of these things are on automatic. I know for me, I wrote about this like very small experience in the book, along with some bigger experiences, but this really tiny one that I was in my kitchen and I couldn't open the pasta jar, the sauce. And my small child at the time, I think he was around 4 or 3, my middle son, I just remember out loud in the kitchen, because it's like an open area. I tried a couple times and I just was like, I can never open these bottles. I'm never going to be able to open it. And he just piped up. He turned around. He was in like the family room, which is connected. And he just said, Mom, take a few breaths and try 3 more times. I think you could do it. And he's like, if you say you can't do it, you probably can't do it. And I was like, oh my gosh, we kind of hold each other accountable. Even my kids, like I will point out to them, the can't part. The word can't is a tough one. We all say it. I don't
Yeah,
want them to feel they can't do something.
right.
Some things are going to be really hard and they may not be able to do it today, but they doesn't mean they won't ever be able to do it. And
What
so, yeah.
Yeah, what I keep hearing from you over and over through this whole interview is that it takes practice
Mhm.
and this is not a one-time thing.
Right.
This is going to come up over and over. You certainly can do well, as you said, you know all these tools, but we're
Right.
going to slip once in a while. We're going to say we can't open that jar and get
Right.
mad or stomp our foot. But I think, as you said, the difference is the awareness. As, oh, I
Yeah.
slipped, okay, but now I know, and next time I'll do it differently.
And the most powerful part again is the awareness and then the willingness openly in front of these people you care about to try to make that change. So I was thinking about it. I was so down on myself for all the times where I'm like, oh my gosh, I slipped up that. But then I started thinking about it differently. And I said, wow, what a great example of being able to show I slipped up. I will be able to open this. I corrected it. He corrected me, and we did it all in real time. And so not only are you showing the tool, but you're actually showing the struggle and your sort of mistake or your not even mistake, what you did on automatic, and then you showed the change through it. So even when you slip up, it's a wonderful opportunity for yourself and for those around you to see that and where what you do next.
Yeah, yeah. In self-care, is there anything you think that we are not getting right about self-care? I mean, we talk about certainly exercising and eating
Mm-hmm.
well and getting enough sleep and being around positive people. But is there something we're missing?
So, my favorite thing to talk about in the world of self care is number one, I feel like we've gotten to a point where it's just become another point of performance, and that can cause a lot of
Mm,
pressure. There is just so much out there that is telling us what
yeah,
we should be doing to take care of ourselves.
yeah,
For
yeah.
me, as like a woman in my 40s, which they have just come out with a ton of studies to show that is the most anxious period of life, and I get it. But as a mom with young kids, as someone that has a career, as someone that's still in a relationship, like we are constantly like, you need to be working out, you need to be building muscle, you should be eating X amount of grams of protein. Like I don't even have time to count the protein, let alone research how much protein is in what. You should be having a healthy sex life. You should be going out with your friends and you need girlfriends. You should be going
Should.
should so much that I always
Yeah,
come back to this
yeah.
idea that I truly believe in what I had said about before, which is something called micro moments. And I have found in busy life, the things that don't work are the things that feel like I used to do them and they worked for me then, but like being able to do a 35-minute meditative practice every morning or, have the weekly massage or whatever, going to 3 exercise classes in a week, or even being able to walk as much as I want. All these things that used to help me and honestly are powerful and amazing. I don't often have the time to fit them in the current season of my life on a daily basis, which then was just making me feel bad
Right.
because I wasn't taking care of myself. And now I know even the smallest moments,
Right.
even 30 seconds, if
Exactly.
I steal, I call them stealing moments, this micro moment, there is no there's no amount of time that is too small to perform an act that either
Mhm.
brings you joy or
Yes.
makes you feel safe.
Yes.
And
Great.
those are so healthy. It's better to do like 5 of those a day than to try to pressure yourself into getting 1 hour of something in on like every Tuesday.
So well said, Deepika. I'm so glad you mentioned that. All right, we're getting to the close of this interview. What's the one thing you would recommend that we all do today to begin to build our optimism muscle? And then tell us how we can get the new book. But tell us that.
Okay. So, I actually wrote this book during the hardest season of my life and in the darkest place that I was. We were going through one of my children, a really scary and significant medical diagnosis that came out of nowhere. And it was literally shattered us in the middle of while I was writing a book on optimism. So I, more than anyone, as a scientist, know these tools work, but I know personally that they work. And this is the part that's powerful. They work in imperfect conditions. And I think that is the part that we need to be trained on is tools that actually allowing ourselves to receive tools that actually work for real people living real lives in this time period of 2026 right now and beyond.
What's one
And
of the
one of
things you
those
did during that very difficult time that helped you?
Yeah. Well, probably one of the biggest things I did was lean on my support, which I wasn't great about doing before. But one of the really practical things I did that I talk about in the book, besides scheduling worry time, is this idea that I call a to-do list. And it is scientifically just based on marking the things that you've accomplished. And so in uncertain times and heavy times, you can feel overwhelmed and you never feel like you're doing enough or that you're doing anything. And so reminding myself at the end of the night, at the end of the day before going to sleep, instead of a to-do list, I started making something I call a to-do list. And I'm looking
Love
around
it.
because I actually have
Love
a
it.
to-do list here, but it is literally all the things that I have accomplished in the day.
That's
And
great.
they can be small, like I drank water, which was a hard thing for me, and
Right.
especially during that time. Or I gave my child the medicine that worked. I ate lunch today.
The
I
little
packed my
things.
kids' lunch.
The
The
little
little things.
things.
There's my little
Deepika,
to-do list.
Deepika, we have 2 minutes.
Okay.
So let's talk about your book, how people can get it.
Yes.
And
The power
thank
of
you.
real
This is such a
optimism.
wonderful interview.
The Power of Real Optimism is out tomorrow. It is available everywhere that you buy books, and tomorrow is a great day to buy them, or today. But Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Hudson Books, Target, anywhere, everywhere you buy books, please buy the book, leave reviews. This is the way the message and the movement of real optimism really spreads
Great.
is through you. Every order really matters and counts. And I am so passionate about this because we are all living through very uncertain and
Yes, we
heavy
are.
times. And I don't
We
want
are.
people to just look away and say the answer is to not look at what's happening. I want people to be able to look, not be numb, and have the tools to carry what it is that we are all carrying and to keep engaging.
Thank you so much. Very inspirational and practical and optimistic, but realistic as
Yes,
well.
real optimism.
Thank you. Thank you. And if there's any other links, they can go to your website,
Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
the website is
DrDeepikaChopra.com. And I'm always on Instagram at Dr. Deepika Chopra. And I read everything. I love talking about this. So DM me. It's always me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Deepika.
Thank you.
It was very inspirational.
Thank
Thanks.
you for
All right,
having me.
stay on the line for a minute. All right, folks, that wraps up this edition of the Patricia Raskin Positive Living Show. To find me and get a copy of my newsletter, which I send out the first of every month, you'll get to see all these wonderful guests, like Dr. Deepika Chopra, who is on this month's newsletter. And write to me, Patricia at patriciaraskin.com, and there's also a form on my website. If you're interested in getting your positive message out and doing a podcast series, I've interviewed over 6,000 people in my career, and I'd love to help you. So contact me, Patricia at patriciaraskin.com. Remember, stay healthy, stay happy, get the support you need, and know you can make your dreams come true. Until next time, I'm Patricia Raskin. Bye for now.